Welcome to the Expona Audio Insider Podcast. My name is Lenny Florentine, and today we're going to be talking with Hans Looman from Infigo Audio, and we're going to be covering his entire line of products, which includes a streamer, a DAC, a preamp, and two different types of amplifiers. What's up, man?
Hey, thank you for having me here, Lenny. Things are going fine, and I'm really looking forward to, just have a nice little chat about audio stuff.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about your company for those who are not familiar with Infigo Audio. Give us the scoop.
Okay, so Infigo Audio started in 2020, which was actually one of the most challenging times, as you all know, to start a company. It's more or less, gotten out of hands hobbies that turned into a full-blown company. I'm an electronics engineer by nature and always been very passionate about music. And so in my spare time, I was always just basically on a quest to develop in my sort of world the best possible audio amplifier. The results of that led to making a company in 2020, and had another year and a half to wait before I could actually finally get to the sound shows. But here we are. So essentially based on amplifier circuits, and then also spread out into DACs and all of the other stuff that you need there. We basically now have the whole line complete. So it's a Canadian company. We're located in British Columbia, Western Canada, and just really have a lot of connections into the US. So that's where we really started to branch out into.
And you have some. I'm looking at your amps right now, and I've seen these at the shows, and they're massive Class A amps. They look very well built. So, what products are in your line? Like, what is your repertoire of products that you offer? You have the amplifier. I believe you have a streamer as well.
That's correct. Yeah. So we basically started with the amplifiers and then, just sort of needed to add source material to this. So the DAC was the second product. That's called our Method 4. And so, of course, a DAC is nice, but you still need source material to connect to that. And so we finally introduced now a streamer as well. And then, of course, there's a preamplifier to be able to connect also turntables. So we basically start to match the whole gamma of things that you want to connect to the amplifier, ranging from digital to all the way, from analog turntables to digital streamers.
And this streamer is your newest product, correct?
Yes, it is.
Is this
Yeah.
is this the one? So I'm looking at it. It has a acrylic top, like a see-through top.
Yes, exactly. So all of our products have always been built in a way that, you can just look inside. We take pride of the way that we lay out all the circuits. And it's a shame if that would be all boxed up, and nobody can ever see it. So we did a little funky things. That's actually more or less a joke out of the past where we had some blue lights connected into an amplifier and people were looking at that and like, wow, that's actually cool. And we started to take that maybe to some a little over the top, but it's really fun to look inside a product and you see everything there laid out with this blue sort of background. I see actually you have some blue light on the background of your
I
studio
do.
as well, which just always looks, it gives a cool sort of feature to it. And with the streamer, that's no different.
So the amplifiers have a click. You can see in those as
Oh yeah.
well.
You can look inside and you will see this blue glow basically below the capacitors, around the power supplies, everywhere. It's kind of a nice feature. Most people really take the top off always. The whole idea is that, you get some sense of interesting thing going on there. Like what's the first thing, for instance, when you buy a new sports car, you get some friends over. What's the first thing that happens?
You got to show them. You got to show them under the
Well,
hood.
you pop the hood, right? You pop the hood.
Yeah.
Well, so the same thing goes with the amplifier. You basically use only one thumb screw, just pop the metal hood if you want, and then you see through the see-through glass inside of the amplifier. You see all this sort of stuff going on. It resembles a bit of like hydraulics of an engine more than wiring. We take pride even in the wiring in these things.
Oh, I love that. That's so fun. I think showing off what you have like that. Like I always like when there's taking the top off stuff or when there's a clear top, it's even better. So that's really cool that you already have that integrated into the system. For those who haven't heard your amplifier, your streamer, your DAC, or your preamp, or your system that you have, what are some of the things that makes your products, the Infigo products, unique?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked. So we basically take pride in creating as massive a soundstage as possible. So you'll hear that there's a lot going on. If the speakers are able to basically project that soundstage, we will be able to make that shine. So there's always a very direct, sort of like engaging soundstage, because that's what I really want. People need to be drawn into the music, you know? When I'm testing, I'm sometimes just looking at my watch and thinking like, holy moly, I just sort of like listened for an hour while I was actually just testing a certain feature of the amplifier. And that is really what I want, just so that it's so engaging that you just really want to listen more. Now I'm curious what this will sound like. And yeah, you keep just playing music, and that's really fun. We do that a lot actually with listening sessions when we get friends over. They just start to get a whole new sort of feel for the music that they love, you know? It's
And I love,
yeah,
I'm
that's what
looking
I
at the
think.
preamp, and that
Yeah.
has a screen as well.
The preamp has sort of the same form factor as the DAC. So we have a little screen on there where you can select stuff and see things. I kept the fonts rather big, so from a distance you can actually see what's playing. I mean, my eyes aren't really getting any better, and sometimes you have this equipment where you just really have to be like up front and see what's selected. So that screen serves to show what's going on, and but it also is a second function for touchscreen. You can select sources and things on the equipment in case that you just can't find the remote, you know, like never happens to anybody ever that you lose the remote, you know.
Oh, no, that
It
never
always
happens to
sits in a
anybody.
couch or
Nobody.
what have you. So then at least when you're up close to the equipment, you can just press some things and change the volume that way by pressing on the bar that shows the volume, or press the source and just change the inputs, that sort of thing. So on the preamp, it's the exact same. You can just select sources, you can select volume and what have you just by touchscreen, but of course also with the remote.
How they all match. What material are the chassis made out of?
They're made of very, very thick 6061 marine grade aluminum that's anodized. So most of our walls are like 10 millimeter thick. That's just under half an inch. So they're quite massive. They're built like tanks. It has, just because of that, a very nice sort of solid frame. The preamp, for instance, weighs already something like 45 pounds or so, just because of the enclosure. So the good thing is that makes it actually quite insensitive to vibrations from the outside. You know, if you're playing your music quite loud, then yeah, the equipment should have a solid base so that it's not like flimsy and just picking up all sorts of vibration, which is very detrimental to the sound.
So going into 2025, do you have any new products? I know the streamer's new, correct? The streamer's a newer
Yes, the
product.
streamer is very new. And so that's actually also been a quest of mine. Now that I had a DAC, I just wanted to find the best possible source to play. It's always been an interesting sort of thing where everything matters. You know, the chain of sound is always just as good as the weakest component in there. And it really started to become the source. So when streamers came out, computers, and that is still the thing that I think, don't really sort of have a good place in audio, you know? So a good like server, it's all fun and games, but still it's a computer, you know? And sound is always the sort of least prioritized type of thing in a computer. So I've been on a quest to find a good source, and I developed at the time, a set-top box for like TV things and what have you, and that was based on Android. So, but then there was a company also from the Netherlands. As you can hear in my accent, I'm originally from the Netherlands. We are in Canada now, but yeah. So excuse my accent, but if you can
That
always
sounds.
hear that
I
somehow.
think we're good. I think it's.
Yeah.
I think it's. I think. Yeah, I can
So
understand it completely fine.
it turned out to be another Dutch company that created a thing called USB Audio Player Pro. And so he bypassed the entire operating system to talk directly to a DAC. And I thought, wow, that's the ticket, you know? So I talked to him, and he made a special version for Infigo for the USB Audio Player Pro, and integrated that into an Android based first little streamer. Well, that thing worked fantastic, but the user interface was like really difficult because the app was originally made for a phone. So to do that from a distance, when the thing is a phone in itself, you can't really connect the tablet to that to control it, you know? So that was horrible. From there, moved up a couple of things and found a program that I really liked. It's Ordervana. And when they finally, after a lot of like pressuring them into it, they came with a Linux version. And so that is now one of the base programs in my streamer. It runs Linux. It runs Audirvana if you want. It runs Rune endpoint if you want. It runs HQ player endpoint. It runs UPnP endpoint. But I always like to run the thing as an Audirvana server. The beauty is it runs the music in its own core. So it's a multi-core processor, but the audio is completely into its own dedicated core. So nothing interrupting the audio, nothing doing weird things. The operating system can just have its own fun in the other cores, but not in my precious little audio core. And that cleans up the audio so well. It's really amazing. Then there's a lot of other things that you have seen on the industry. People buy audiophile grade switches, all sorts of isolation equipment, optical cables, and what have you, just to keep digital noise out. Well, I really like that. It's very important to keep all the digital nasties out of your audio. And we do that by having in the streamer already optical isolation in, so there's no network connector in there, but an optical connector. And the nasty network can just be sitting elsewhere, but just with a nice fiber where no noise can jump over, it connects into the streamer. And then packets get reclocked with ultra low jitter, so that it's just really amazing how that cleans up the signal. And we don't really care anymore what's all in the network. It gets filtered out in the streamer and then goes as pure as possible to the DAC. And it's amazing what that sounds like. So I'm home right now with that new streamer. It's really great. The quest has ended.
So what do you hook into it? So you hook the network into the streamer by USB, like from a external
No, what
source?
happens is that you have a network at home with your routers and switches and what have you. And so where your computers sit, where you have connection to the internet, and that is how the streamer connects, but via an optical cable. So with the streamer, you will get a little optical box that turns into an Ethernet port. So that Ethernet port you plug into your network, and then the streamer can see your whole network. So if you have any source material there, it can play from it. It can connect to Tidal, can connect to Cobus, and yeah, do all the things you want. But it also presents an internal terabyte storage. So you can, and that is just a network drive. So all your music you can copy into that network drive, and then the streamer can play it local. So it doesn't have to even transport over your network. And that is also a great benefit for the sound.
Well, that's really interesting. I don't know that I've really seen too many where they actually take the network, out of the streamer and have it in a separate box, to get rid of any extra noise.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
noise floor must be really, really low
It is
on this
so
one.
low. It's like dark. And that's how we all want it, so that any of the sound just pops out. I can't really hear the difference anymore getting a file from Cobus and playing something off of my network. It's just all
Wow.
sounds just incredible. It's fantastic. So we live in a very good time. The only problem now is that you have so much stuff to select from that sometimes you think like, heck, what I'm going to play now.
Yeah, what are we going to play next? Everything's at our fingertips. And so you
It's
go
a
from the
luxury problem, really.
streamer. It's a luxury problem. It absolutely is. You go from the streamer to the DAC. So tell me a little bit about the DAC, what kind of chips you have in it, like how the DAC design is, because somebody would obviously get the streamer and the DAC
Yeah, it's
together.
a perfect combination. Yeah. So I started in 2010 as doing consultancy work for a company that also seemed to be located here in Kelowna, British Columbia, that is an offspring of ESS technology. Well, we may have all heard of this Sabre DAC chipset. Well, they were actually designed right here in town. So I befriended these guys and did many audio shows for them to basically get their DAC promoted that they built on the Sabre DAC chipset. So they started with the ES-9018, then the 28, and that's sort of where it was Resonance. They then at some point just unfortunately just like stopped business. But I know the guys that designed this DAC chip very well and decided to base my DAC on the ES9038 Pro. That was the best chip at that time. So it's a very finicky chip to work with. There are basically sort of two possible outcomes. You either get a fantastic sounding DAC or you get something that's quite mediocre if you don't do it right. It's a difficult chip to work with.
You're building like the power supply and everything around that. That can affect the way
Oh,
that
yeah.
the DAC sounds.
In fact, that is the most important thing. You need to get that DAC chip like so well powered that it can just do its thing, you know? And so if you have plenty of analog power supplies around this chipset, so I use two of them, one for each channel, with 8 channels parallel, so there's a lot of IV conversion going on there. And then there's lots of analog power supplies around this whole thing. There are separate analog power supplies on every single subcircuit of the DAC. Every oscillator has its own analog power supply, and then very good ones like linear technology, the lowest noise floor types of power supplies. So it's really a box full of power supplies, and then there's some DAC chipsets in it.
So I think that's what like really makes DACs like the one that you guys have and like these higher end DACs different than your entry level DAC or streamers or whatever. Because a lot of people may just look at the chip and be like, oh, it's the same chip, it's going to sound the same. But in reality, it's all the nuances that go into powering every single piece
Oh, absolutely.
inside the DAC that like you can control the way it sounds.
Yes, absolutely. And that goes for so many things. Not only the power supplies are extremely important for your noise floor, but also important for your noise floor is the clocks. If you look at the clocks in these things, you can just basically go from a little crystal for like 10 cents or so, all the way up to like oven controlled clocks that cost more than like $200 just for a clock. And
Wow.
the difference is amazing.
So tell me about that a little bit. I'm very curious of how the clocks work.
Well, if you basically have a digital audio signal, then you would think, okay, that's ones and zeros, right? Well, all fun and games, but at the end of the day, still there's a very finicky sort of thing that creeps into this, just like it always ruins also our analog signals, it ruins our digital signals. In this case, it's so-called jitter. So whenever you have ones and zeros switching in time, the exact moment that they switch is not always the same. And there can be a little variance in there, and that just basically appears as noise at the end of the day. But it also does all sorts of things unrelated to the frequency that's going on at that time. You get all sorts of like intermodulation products that mess up the openness of your soundstage. So all of these things are super important to basically just keep under control. Not only does it lower your noise floor, but it also just makes the presence of the instruments and the locations of each virtual sound source in your stereo image extremely more defined. And that makes a very important sort of like difference. So I always have a theory about sound stages that this far nobody has really sort of like contradicted. What I think is one of the most important things is in our perception of audio, we really, really know where sound comes from, usually without having to think about it. So our brain is wired in such a way that we can focus on sound just like we can focus with our eyes on a certain object. If you now, for instance, look here at my ventilation system, then you basically see that particular object, and in your peripheral vision you notice the rest that's around it, but you're not paying attention to it because it's not important to you at that point. Okay, so your brain filters away 80% of the stuff that you're not like really focused on. In sound, it's the exact same thing. If your brain is given the ability to listen to, for instance, a trumpet playing or a voice or some interesting little percussion thingy going on in the background, if all the audible clues are correct and the positions are correct to your brain, you will be able to listen to that particular little thing and enjoy that in its full thing, because the rest is going to be suppressed somehow without you even having to work with that. So now, if somehow the audible clues are messed up a little because of jitter or other things, your brain isn't able to throw these things away anymore. It will know like, oh, there's a violin here, but something's off, but I don't know exactly what. And that is because there's digital garbage around that violin that you just don't know what to do with. So your brain can't throw it out. And then you get like fed up with it, And in the extreme cases, it may even go to listening fatigue. If everything is all right, it's amazing what happens. And that's sort of what is important in all of these aspects. And your clock circuits in your digital systems are very important to this.
So I love how that was explained because a lot of people really they just don't really know what a clock is. That's
Uh-huh.
something that, it's kind of new for me. And I understand, the ones and the zeros, but to take it into that kind of explanation is
Yeah.
very helpful. Hopefully that like if you guys out there don't know how a clock works, that I think that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah, and this is also why a lot of people really sort of like don't care for digital because most of their stuff is just not done right. And then, of course, it's not fun. And then, like, to listen to a vinyl where things are less complex, if you will, that's automatically way more compatible to the brain, you know? So, yeah, but everything should be done right. And then digital is beautiful and just as beautiful as analog.
So we're following the chain a little bit. We've gone from the streamer to the DAC, and now let's get into this preamp with the touch screen. It looks like it has like a analyzer kind of built into the screen, and I was looking at how this was built on the inside, and everything's laid out really well. So tell me a little bit about the preamp, what kind of what went into this, and what makes it special.
Okay, so it's fun that you say this thing about the analyzer. So if you look at the front of all of our equipment, you will see that there's a couple of little things going on there. That's just in the design to break up the sort of flat surface a little bit. It's just yeah, a way that Infigo equipment shows. So it's something that you can recognize right away. You see the equipment, you think, oh yeah, that's an Infigo component because they all look similar in design that way. To not break the pattern of these metal engraved bars in the front, they basically continue in the display. And some of those bars have actual functionality, like for instance, the yellow one that you can see in the display to the right is actually your volume. So that bar goes up and down with the volume. And you can even touch that bar to make the volume go up or down. So it's a kind of fun thing. The other bar may be the sample rate. You know, if there's something digital going on, then the higher the sample rate, the higher that bar is. It's just a fun little thing. It's not really
That is
meaning
fun.
anything else, but it's just cool because we can.
I like how you took the design from the chassis and just kind of put it into the screen. That's so unique.
Yeah, exactly. And so then at least it doesn't break the design and it all looks like uniform. So that's always nice when it becomes like whole. And yeah, so like said on that screen, you can select your inputs. There's many inputs. So we have a couple of like balanced inputs and we have a couple of RCA inputs. But the fun part is you can actually program these inputs also to be outputs. For instance, if you listen to, let's say, a piece of vinyl, you can select, for instance, XLR1 to be output. So you can connect that to a tape recorder so that when you listen to vinyl, you can just like use that XLR1 as an output to your tape recorder.
Wait, wait. So you can take an input and make it an output?
Yes, because it's all a matrix. So you can switch stuff and, for instance, use one as a home theater bypass or move signal from one to another. So yeah, you can do some fun things there because it's really a switchboard. And that makes it very versatile because nowadays there may be just not only one amplifier, there may be a whole bunch of them in your setup. I don't know. So yeah, I kept that very versatile so that it's not just an amplifier or preamplifier, if you will, but it's really an interesting piece of equipment where you can connect certain sources in a way that gives you somewhat more freedom.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm looking at the inside of it now, okay, and it's laid out so well, the design, but there's a lot to it. So you have all the inputs and outputs on the back that have this interesting connector that goes to the board from the
Yes,
actual input output itself, which I want to know about. But then there's like a whole board of just full of caps. Like I don't know how
yes,
many caps are there, but it's a lot of caps. Then you have a lot of chips as well. So can you break down those three areas for me so I kind of know what I'm looking
yes,
at?
absolutely. So the board that you're referring is actually the power supply. So all of our equipment always has analog power supplies. And so there's like voltage regulators again on every single subcircuit. But to keep the noise floor super low, we have voltage regulators on voltage regulators so that you bring the noise floor even more down. So you see all these capacitors, there's like rows and rows for every rail. So yeah, there was less space in height. So we needed to just go with lots of parallel capacitors. They're all very good, very low ESR capacitors, like putting about 10 or so parallel on each rail. That just gives you a phenomenal stable power supply. So that's what that's all about. You see, the large board is full of regulators. And then there's also the volume control on that board. You see a lot of blue relays on there. We do use actually gold contacted gas-filled switching relays to switch precision resistors so that everything is done in the analog domain. And that's just really the best way. You will just be able to just get the voltage so nicely controlled. Let's say it this way. My controls are digital because you can use the remote control, you can use the touchscreen and what have you, but the signal path is always fully analog. Fully analog. That's why I use precision resistors in a large array, just like a sort of like R2R type of DAC approach, but now for volume control. And so that keeps everything just fantastic sounding.
Now that's an amazing. And does this have one of the hood popper screws
Oh yeah,
so
of
you can
course.
show?
You can
That's
pop the hood
amazing.
and just look inside. Absolutely, 100%. And
That's
then
wild.
there's a phono stage built into the right end of the thing, so that has its own wall, so that it's shielded away from anything. That has again a bunch of analog power supplies on there. It does moving coil, it does moving magnets.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
see that
exactly.
wall there. That's kind of
Yeah,
neat to have
yeah,
it so
yeah,
isolated from the rest to
yeah,
give it, the best signal possible and low
yeah. And
distortion.
another fun thing is you can actually listen to a vinyl. And when you're not entirely sure if your moving coil has the correct loading impedance, the resistors are very important there. You can use the remote while listening and just change them on the fly and listen like, I
Wow.
like this better or less. You can switch the input capacitance. So you have a couple of things to listen to there as well. And it may sometimes be in connection with your cables that you may just have to just switch that resistor up a little or down a little compared to what the manufacturer specifies. If that suits your ear better, then go for it. You can do that while listening to your favorite piece of music.
I don't know if I've ever seen it on the remote. That's pretty cool. I like that idea.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It works great that way because ultimately you want to just be able to sit in your listening chair and just get it done right there.
So now we're going from the preamp. We're going to take it to the amp now. You have
Yeah.
two amps, correct? The
Yes.
3 and the 6. Tell me about that. So are they stereo amps? Are they mono amps? Is one and one the other?
Okay, when we started in 2021, the first show, we basically brought the monoblocks to that show. That was actually our first product, the Method 3. And everybody loved them. So, but they always ask like, oh, do you also have a stereo version? And so they kept nagging and nagging and nagging. And I thought, okay, that's actually not even a bad idea to also just try to make that stuff smaller and put it into a single chassis. So that's why we also have a stereo amplifier now, and that's our Method 6. The sound signature is pretty much the same, but of course the monoblocks have more power. And the nice thing
So
about the monoblocks is that you can put them close to the speaker, so you can make a very short connection to your speaker, which is always good because the ultimate cable is no cable, where it comes down to those types of things.
so tell me about that. So that's an interesting point. So why, for someone that is unaware, why would you want the amplifiers closer to the speakers?
Every amplifier needs to exert full dominance over the speaker. So a speaker is not usually just a sort of like device that just does whatever it tells. There's always stuff coming back from the speaker as well. And the amplifier needs to absorb that. So whenever there's a cable between your amplifier and your speaker, that cable is a resistance. No matter how you look at it, it just like makes it a little harder for the amplifier to completely control whatever is going on in the speaker. So the shorter that cable, the lower the impedance in your cable, the lower the resistance, and the better the control is that the amplifier has over the speaker. And you will always notice that in some gain in how it sounds. It's always going to be better if the amplifier can control that speaker better.
Very interesting. I like how I'm looking at the design of the inside of the stereo amplifier,
Okay,
and it looks like it's built in like a dual mono design, and
exactly.
everything's kind of separated. You have two different toroidal transformers for each channel, and there are capacitors. Then you have something in the middle. It's
That's
a
the
very
control
unique
board.
design. It's a
That's the
very
control
unique
board.
design because you have those LEDs coming up. You can see in it, and it just like looks like a cool design. So what is the control board made out of? What's
So
going on in that?
there's really a lot going on in there. So the amplifiers are indeed just two monoblock amplifiers, if you will, put into one chassis, but they need to be like kept in balance. So there's a lot of things going on under the hood there, literally. no pun intended. And one of the things is to keep the amplifier balanced. So as you know, amplifiers just need to work around 0 volt and swing around that. That usually is something that needs to be stabilized because amplifiers can run away in a certain direction, and you don't want that to happen because speakers don't like DC coming out of amplifiers. So we have a very special approach to do this, which I call the DCBA system. It's the DC bias adjust in the amplifier. So there's a control circuit that basically measures every single thing that's going on in the output stage and sets certain things so that the amplifier stays in balance. We don't do this with a control loop, so not with a DC servo loop, because that tends to eat up your bass. There is always something that gets affected when you mess with the sound signal. And so we basically only adjust things in the bias so that the amplifier stays at 0 output when there's nothing. But the beauty of this is that we can actually drive the amplifier down all the way to DC. There's no low roll off in our amplifier. There is none. So the only thing that happens is that the control circuit will block the output whenever the DC level gets like dangerous. So if there's stuff going wrong, you have DC coming out of your source equipment or what have you, it'll just switch off the speaker. But other than that, you can go down to 0 hertz with your signal. And that cleans up the bass tremendously. It's really amazing what happens there. Yeah, so that's one of the things that circuit is doing. Then the other thing, it is the brains of the amplifier. So it keeps also the power supplies at bay. It does basically control everything.
So how many watts is this amplifier?
This amplifier is 100 watts in class A.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's
So
pretty
that's
that's
another
pretty
very
good for
interesting
Class A.
thing that sets Infigo apart. So when I started designing amplifiers, I knew right away, like, okay, I need a class A amplifier because this is just really sounding best to my ears. And my first prototype was a 1 watt class A amplifier, and it was getting hot like no tomorrow. So to scale that up is really a problem. Well, this is one well-known problem with class A amplifiers. When you have more power, they really tend to cook the room. So I spent about 3 years struggling with that problem. Like, how can I basically get my class A behavior, but doing it in a more clever way so that we're not cooking the output stage and that I can be able to scale this thing up without making this thing a radiator. So I found a way that's different than floating bias that you see some other brands work with. It's a very clever way where I inject the power enough to keep all transistors conducting at all times, but in a controlled fashion rather than brute force. So the conventional way to make a class A amplifier is just look at whatever current needs to go to the speaker. If the highest current is 10 amp, just float 10 amp through all the transistors at all times. You know that you can get 10 amps to your speakers, but this 10 amp is wasted in heat. So that's why these things run so bloody hot. What I do is run always a current through the output stage so that it's always conducting at all times. It never switches off. A very intelligent, actually even decoupled from the music type of control, so that we're not getting any sort of like effect to the sound. And that results in a very super clean, very fast, but very pleasing musical signal. Just the way that class A amplifiers sound. But we're not cooking the room.
Hearing all this, now I'm excited to listen to it at Expona. Are you're going to have both amps, the preamp, the streamer, and the DAC all set up there?
Yeah, so what we're going to do is actually work with the mono blocks, just because we can show those off, and we're going to do that probably with a couple of speakers that will just have like lots of current draw.
Do you know what speakers you're going to have with paired with it yet, or is that undecided at this time?
It's undecided this time, yeah, but it'll
Okay,
be something
okay.
very good. It's going to be very good.
So, what can people look forward to coming to your room? What can they expect?
So what they can expect is pretty much the whole gamma of equipment there. So ranging from the streamer through the preamplifier, the DAC, the preamplifier, amplifiers, all on display so that you can see everything. We're going to bring our new equipment footers, which are also very special. So as you can see, the equipment has flanges that have M8 holes, so you can put normally spikes or footers or ISO equipment or what have you. We've developed a couple of new footers that we will bring to the Expona, and that's going to be also a debut, where we utilize sapphire bearings to decouple the equipment from any vibration in the chassis or in the areas that they're put on, in like the
Oh, so
racks.
it's going to be like an external bearing that separates it from the foot.
Yeah.
Well,
And they
that's
are
so.
sapphires.
So
Very
can
interesting stuff.
you, in theory, this is where my head goes. If it's not scientific at all, but in theory, could you take like the streamer of the amp and kind of just like give it a little shove and it'll move back and forth,
Well, it's
or is
going
it
to
like
be staying
solid?
in place. It's going to be staying in place because it's so heavy. But yeah, you would be able to rock it down back and forth a little bit.
Okay, I always find that to be very interesting. I don't
Yeah.
know why.
It's
That's just
important
one of
though.
those things. I have a pair of speakers that have that, and they have about like it has the ball bearing, and then it has about an inch, or maybe not that much, but you can actually push the speaker, and it'll kind of rotate around and still itself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What kind of ball
And
bearings are on
that's
your
just a
speakers,
good.
if I may ask?
I don't. They're silver. I
Okay, so they're probably like
don't
metal.
have any idea.
They're
They are
probably like
metal,
metal.
yeah. So it
Yeah.
sits in like a 1 inch divot, and it just kind of or half-inch divot. It just kind of makes it so that there's no vibration and noise from the
Yeah,
stands and
exactly.
stuff like that. And I just think, just from a visual fun aspect, I like to go up and like give them a little shove and let them kind of
Yeah,
bounce back. So
yeah, 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 yeah.
great. Well, I can't wait to see it. Expona. It's going to be a great time. How long have you been going to the show?
So the Expona, basically since it started again after COVID.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so we've been on every show and we'll be here again. Like I said, we started in 2020. We had already uh, like lots of different shows that we wanted to go to, Rocky Mountain being one of them. Unfortunately, that didn't survive COVID. And then all the shows started pulling the plug because of this COVID thing happening. So yeah, our first show was the Capital Audio Fest in 2021, and we've basically been doing pretty much all of the shows that we could possibly go to after that, just to get the word out. Infigo was a brand new brand. Nobody has heard of it, but we're starting to really get some traction now. And yeah, Expona helps us also in getting that coverage further out. So thank you guys also for helping promoting us, because
Yeah,
yeah, we
that's
just want
amazing.
to be able to get lots of people to listen to the stuff that we bring.
Yeah, I can't wait to listen to it myself after learning about it. I'm so excited for Expona coming up and to see you guys there and get to enjoy all the products that I've probably never tried before. Maybe I have at a show, but that I'm gonna try it again. But I thank you so much for coming on the Expona Audio Insider podcast. It was a great time. I think we learned a lot, right? So
Always good.
I think your skill level is way up here and I'm way down here, but I'm kind of inching my way up now after all this. So I got a
All
little
right.
handle on things. I think it was very good. But I appreciate it for the Audio Insider podcast from Expona. We will see you guys next time.